Well, for those of you who have been asking, we now have the Zenith Super Duty Firewall Forward Hose Kit available and ready on the kitplaneenthusiast.com website. In this video, I will take you through that kit and I will show you how it installs in the Super Duty. This is the hose kit laid out on the table, and I have it laid out in this order for a reason. And as I mentioned in the previous video, there's going to be two kits available. One is just the hoses, if that's all you want. And then we also have an accessory kit available, which has all of the fittings and other accessories that you're going to need to install the fuel and oil lines on your Super Duty. Now I have these hoses laid out sort of how they will install in the airplane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these accessories and put them in their correct place, and I will show you the whole system put together, and then of course I'll show it to you installed on the airplane so you can get a good idea of how it goes together. Well, let's start with the fuel system, and I have all the fuel lines laid out kind of in the flow that they will go in the airplane. And we will start right here with the firewall gascolator mount. The Zenith supplied gascolator will mount to here, and obviously this will mount to the firewall. In the gascolator, we'll have a 90-degree elbow with a real short fuel line that goes to the fuel pump. Coming from the fuel pump, we have this fuel line here that's going to go into the mechanical fuel pump on the back of the engine. This steel straight fitting right here goes into the fuel pump, and on the other side of the fuel pump we have a T-fitting. The fuel flow will continue down this line here through a fitting here. You will have the red cube fuel flow sensor from Dynon that plugs in there with a 90-degree elbow with the final fuel line from here going to the carburetor and then the AN fitting that goes in the carburetor. If we go back to this T-fitting, you'll notice a skinny fuel line. It's the shorter of the two skinny fuel lines, or the two skinny lines. This one here is the fuel pressure sender line. It plugs into here. Actually, this will go like this. These plug into here, and your Dynon supplied fuel flow or fuel pressure sender, that's hard to say, will go into there. Now, even though this is an oil line, I have it here just to show you because it plugs into the manifold here. We'll have another straight fitting, and then your other long skinny line here, this is going to be the oil pressure sender line, and I'll show you where that goes on the airplane. So that is the complete fuel system, and now I'll show you how it all goes together on the airplane. Starting at the beginning again, you can see the firewall gascolator mount back there, and then we have our Zenith supplied gascolator installed. You'll notice the elbow, and you'll notice I have it mounted at a little bit of an angle down, and that's just to get the real nice flow of the hose. That goes into the fuel pump, which you can see is mounted on the passenger side, right there on the bottom of the firewall. The other hose comes out of the fuel pump and it goes up here. And this is the one, if you can see back in there, it goes into the mechanical fuel pump right there. And that steel straight fitting that I showed you goes into the fuel pump, and a hose attaches to that fitting. On the other side of the airplane now, there is our mechanical fuel pump, and you can see right here is that T-fitting. Coming off the bottom of that T-fitting is a short fuel line that goes into the red cube, which is your fuel flow sensor. Then we have another elbow coming out here, and in the final fuel line, it goes down in here to the carburetor. And if we go back to this T-fitting up here, remember the skinny fuel line? This is that skinny fuel line that comes down here to our manifold. And then when we talk about oil, this is our fuel pressure sensor, this is the oil pressure sensor, and this is where that other long skinny line attaches here. It comes all the way out here and to the other side of the airplane, which is this hose right here, and it plugs into the back of the engine. Now, just a note about this manifold. You can see when you get it, it comes with 3 positions here, and we're only using 2, the fuel pressure and oil pressure. So what I did on mine is I just cut this 3rd one off. It goes right on there like that, and I just cut it off because I didn't need it, and it just saves a little tiny bit of weight. So we just have the 2 bolts holding it onto the firewall, and it's just slightly smaller now than if you leave it with the 3. You can certainly mount it like that. There's no problem with that at all. I just wanted to save a little bit of weight, so I chopped the top off. Well, that was the complete fuel system firewall forward. As you guys know, on the website, we do have a complete fuel hose system firewall aft. It goes all the way from the firewall through a fuel selector and up into your fuel tanks. But now that the fuel system is done, we're going to look at the oil system. But before we can talk about the oil system, we need to get a remote oil filter for the Lycoming engine. If you're wondering why you need a remote oil filter, and if you're building a Super Duty, you have surely realized that there is not a lot of space between the back of the engine and the firewall. And the oil filter that comes with the Lycoming engine is mounted back here, and it is simply just too long because it goes back and hits the structure here. So we have a remote oil filter from FWF that has a fitting that goes on the back of the engine and relocates the oil filter on the firewall. If you go to FWF.com, you will find the remote oil filter kits. On the bottom left here, we'll click on the oil filter kits. And we're going to go to remote oil filter kits for Lycoming engines. And the very first one here, AFC-K001. This is a universal Lycoming home built kit. This is the one that I have used on my airplane. If you order that one, that would be probably the correct one for you. When you order the FWF remote oil filter kit, it will come with all of the AN fittings and everything you need except the oil lines. These 2 oil lines are exactly the same, and those are these 2 oil lines here that go from the remote filter to the actual oil filter. I've included this one here because it is the oil line. This is the long, skinny line in the kit, and just like we saw previously, this is your oil pressure sensor with an AN fitting, and then this goes back to the engine. Over here, we have 2 large, long oil lines, and there's a large 90-degree elbow and a 45-degree elbow. Those 2 long lines go from your oil cooler, and one of them goes back here to the back of the engine with the 45-degree elbow. And the other one's going to be hard to see. It is under the remote oil filter. There's a 90-degree fitting. That big 90-degree elbow I just showed you goes into the engine. That oil line is this one right here. It comes down through here and to the oil cooler. Now, speaking of these 2 big oil lines that connect to your oil cooler, you'll notice if you lay them out, one's about 1 inch longer than the other. And the longer one I have here on the outboard side, it's just a little bit longer because it goes down around here and back up to the 90-degree fitting that goes in the engine. And you can see that a little bit better over here on this side. This is that oil hose that comes up. You'll notice there's a 90-degree fitting that goes into the engine. Now, just as a side note, I did mention on a previous video that all of the hoses firewall forward right now on my airplane are just temporarily installed. They all have to come off because I need to remove the engine. But you're probably going to want to secure these hoses so they're not just flopping around. So when I final install this, I'll have an Adele clamp that goes around here and then one that goes around here just to secure the hose so that they're not all flopping around. So definitely take a look at your hoses, and if they need secured in places, don't be afraid to do so. Now guys, I'm going to give you a big important tip that will save you a lot of time. Remember that 90-degree fitting that goes under here we just talked about? You cannot put that in the engine if this is already installed. So before you install this to the back of your engine, go ahead and screw in that 90-degree elbow. All right, guys, if you are planning on installing these hose packages or this firewall forward kit in your Super Duty, I hope this video was helpful in showing you each of the fuel and oil lines, where they install, and where the components install on the firewall. If you do have any questions, just leave a comment below and I will do my best to answer those questions for you. Otherwise, this is available on kitplaneenthusiast.com, along with our fairings and seats and all the other good products that we offer on the website. I'm going to get back to building, and we'll see you guys later.